Welcome to the Stumbling Spirit, Contemplations on the Path of Resilience. Whether you realize it or not, you are resilient. It's your birthright. As you take in your next breath, know this truth. It's not only about your capacity to overcome difficult situations, but it's about your courage to do the necessary work to heal, learn, grow, and move forward. What you gain is invaluable wisdom. And it's through these hard stumbles in life that we often discover a new purpose that aligns with our spirit. My name is Fabio da Silva Fernandez, Reiki Master, Mindfulness Coach, and Mystical Explorer. Join me as the Stumbling Spirit podcast highlights the lives of extraordinary people like you, sharing transformative stories and beneficial practices of resilience to guide you on your wellness journey. Hello, welcome to this special retrospective of Season 4 of the Stumbling Spirit podcast. Before we begin, if you're a first-time or long-time listener and you enjoy my content, I'd really appreciate it if you could follow the show and share it with your network. And if you feel inspired, please leave a rating and review. It makes a big difference. Thank you so much. Throughout Season 4, I examined the relationship between compassion and resilience, and was truly edified by the deep insights and diverse perspectives imparted by my exceptional guests. Another theme that organically arose centered on courageously finding and using our voice, whether expressed through advocacy and protest, art and music, suffering and trauma, or innovation and technology. Building on that last point, on Season 5, I will explore the impact of technology on resilience. How has ancient and modern technology shaped our capacity to be resilient? And what's in store for us in the future? Where is innovation helping us or hurting us? And how can we ultimately use technology to our advantage? But first, let's review the key themes from this year's show. Special thanks to all of the brilliant contributors who shared their resonant stories and grounding wisdom on how to cultivate greater resilience. Now take a quiet moment of relaxation to listen and reflect on some of the compelling sound bites from this past season. Part 1: Finding and Using Our Voice. While most of us have the physical use of our vocal cords, voice is far more layered and universal. Whether through speech, the written word, or via technology, all of us possess a voice that goes far beyond the sound it makes. It's about connecting to our inner truth and rewriting our script. It's about healing our wounded voice and trusting our intuition and higher guidance. It's about genuinely expressing ourselves to the world in many different ways. It's about the humility to ask for help when we need it the most. It means speaking up in advocacy and protest when it counts. At its heart, it's about listening to the voice within to guide us through life with courage, anchored in truth-telling, mindfulness, and alignment with our purpose. Our true voice is our wisdom.
So many of us are on dozens of different signal messages and threads and sharing updates and doing reporting when there are ice spotted anywhere in the neighborhood, doing plate checks on vehicles. But yeah, so my day includes like waking up, seeing that kind of news or those kinds of hyperlocal updates on Signal, going out to the school near my house for kind of the early drop-off watch, and there are at least one of us on each corner around there, just keeping eyes out for vehicles, doing that plate check, providing updates. Again, we've got communications with other neighbors and the school. We've got our whistles to alert if there is anything that happens. It's wild to think that this is what we're having to do. The fact that kids have been targeted here. There was, the day that Renee Good was murdered, they also went to Roosevelt High School here in South Minneapolis, not far away, same day, within hours. And, attacked staff from the school basically during dismissal when there were kids or students were there observing it. Those kinds of things. I think it's just like important to pull out sometimes and remember like, okay, this is crazy. This is like it's not right, it's not normal. And until this is over, we are going to maintain this, until we kick out ICE of this city, ideally, until we abolish ICE entirely so that they don't go somewhere else and attack residents and other communities.
Okay, so I'll give an example that feels more tangible, which is I grew up with an artist father. He's a painter, abstract painter, and a mom who is a proud hippie who did a lot of different things from modeling to having her own catering business to going to school much later in life. And I had a lot of financial instability. So there's a sort of scarcity, never enough. Be careful. You have to save. Don't spend too much. Don't order the most important thing on the menu. When I was a kid, I would even think that, like, oh, I don't want to, put my parents out. So, like, this has been indoctrinated into me, also generationally as well. Like, it didn't just begin with my parents, it goes way up. And without me realizing it until I did, that's what happens. Like, I was very much in the same scarcity. Like, there's not enough to go around. I have to be careful. If I don't save, something will happen. I won't have a cushion. Also, with partners, my mom would say, hey, be careful when you're with a man. Always keep some money to the side. Like, a lot of fear. That's all. A lot of fear around, finances and financial survival. And a new script, I don't want to live like that anymore. It's not helpful, it's harmful. What makes it to me very harmful is that it's saying subconsciously that I don't trust myself or life. And I want to live the rest of my life in trust with moving with trust with myself and trust with life. I can allow myself to spend. I invest in myself, invest in things that are important to me. I can trust that money is energy and it will flow in and out. And I can thank it when it goes out. I can thank it when it comes in. And I can know that no matter what, I'm going to be okay.
I grabbed a bunch of cans from the one liquor store here, and I set out to the country. And I was going out to the country. I was slamming. I probably drank a 6-pack of like these vodka, like heavy percentage drinks, and I rode to the next town. My bicycle to the next town, and I grabbed more booze when I was there. And so yeah, I was like pretty much blacked out. And when I came back, like I said, that's when everything was gone. There, I saw like the moving truck. I just went to the bar because I didn't at that point want to go back to the place because I think I kind of realized what was happening for me at that point. And I remember coming back to my apartment and like it was just like empty. And I called Michael. I talked to Michael and kind of like let him know everything that was happening, just thinking my life was over. And I remember like just being angry at myself. And I just felt really shitty about it. I just felt really shitty about myself. I phoned him and he had picked up and I told him everything what had happened. And I wanted help. I said, I don't know if you can help me. And he right away, he was like, calm down, calm me down. And was like, asked me what he could do. He's like, what can I do for you? Like, can you help? He's like, yeah, we can get you help. And so at that point, he came and visited me the next. He's like, I'm going to come down tomorrow. He's like, can you hang in there? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. Michael said he was going to come around 4 o'clock. I think he showed up around 4 o'clock. And when he came in, he had his camera and he was just like, is everything okay? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I'm not shooting. I just want to know, is everything okay? He's like, do you want to talk about what happened? I said, yeah. He's like, is it okay if I film it? I said, yeah. And so that's where the movie starts.
The biggest thing that I tell people to do if they are starting a business is to network in the place that you want to be. Because if you're selling to people, they have to know who you are. Nobody actually cares about buying anything from anyone that they actually don't know. That's their gut check half the time. So while I was getting my sommelier certification, I was trying to meet with every general manager at every restaurant, every buyer, be like, hey man, who are you? Blah, blah, blah. I'm Renee. Nice to meet you. So that by the time I actually start setting this up, I am no longer an unknown person. They know who I am. They've met me before. They've seen my face. This is fine. And I'm setting up this company, and I have two business partners. I invited them to basically start this business. And, I learned that you probably shouldn't start a business with people that you don't know very well, which is the lesson that I very much learned the hard way. We're doing this business, things are moving forward. I get these weird ideas coming from Jennifer. And there was a bunch of ideas like that where I was like, this is really dumb. This is really stupid. And then the two of them got together and had this meeting. Well, I thought the business was going well. I'm like, we're selling really well. We're getting more warehouse space. We had more clients. And then they cornered me with a fake meeting that was a ruse. I walked into an apartment with a note taker and was immediately presented with they no longer wanted me to be the CEO of the company that I started and that I was supposed to still sell wine and do deliveries for them. And like instantly, I go into flight or fight mode and seem like this crazy person who's upset because I'm ambushed. And I end up calming down. I set up all the legal stuff for the corporation. And I made sure that it was done with people that I really liked. And I sent them the very next day, sent a message through the lawyer saying they owed me this much money. I was no longer going to be part of the business and to remove me from everything.
When people think about accommodations, they think, oh my gosh, that's expensive, that's difficult. If you're an HR person, you might even like cringe a little bit, right, about having to deal with accommodations. And part of what I talk about is throwing all that stigma out the window, right? We are all humans, every single one of us, and we are wonderful, imperfect, and we all have needs, and we're allowed to have needs, right? I myself, I'm an eldest daughter, I'm an eldest granddaughter, I'm a straight A student, and most of my life, I've tried not to have needs, or at least not to talk about them, because that seemed like a sign of weakness to me. And when my son was diagnosed as autistic and was at 5, he was pre-verbal until he was 7, and he had a lot of needs. And he taught me I need to reframe that thinking. It is wrong because he is allowed to have needs and we should fulfill them, and that will help him reach his fullest potential. And it started to give me more grace to myself and more grace to people around me. And I saw it impacting the way that I led and the way that I worked, allowing people to have needs and finding a way to support them actually makes you stronger, them stronger, your organization stronger and more resilient.
To communicate, I am using an app on my phone called Speech Assistant that converts text into sound. The app uses my voice as it sounded before my ALS symptoms began. 11 Labs can create a professional voice clone if you have at least 30 minutes of recordings of you speaking. That's free for anyone with ALS. I have bulbar onset ALS, which is when the motor neurons are destroyed in the corticobulbar area of the brain and brainstem. That's the area of the brain that controls the face, head, and neck muscles, including the lips, jaw, tongue, and throat. This makes it progressively harder to talk, swallow, and breathe. The early signs were a change in my speech, chiefly my inability to pronounce certain sounds, including R, K, and hard G, as in go. All ALS symptoms are challenging, but what is most challenging is the loss of independence. Because my ALS first affected my speech and swallowing, but didn't affect my arms and legs, I was fully independent. The disease has begun to affect my arms and legs, especially my right arm, hand, and shoulder. I'm still independent, but sooner than later, I will lose full independence, which will be challenging.
When we were and I was in corporate sales at that time, and we had to go home, and Zoom became our life. And then all the cracks started showing up. And I was like, interesting. I'm like, okay, do I want to continue being in this space? And it's just, and you started feeling the exhaustion, that sadness, and people were so disconnected and they didn't know what to do. So during that time, I was all of a sudden scripting meditations, and I didn't know I could do that. And I was offering free meditations on Zoom through Facebook. And I was doing it like every single night. And my Zoom, and it was for free. I was offering it for free. And I was just scripting stuff just by the fly. It was hilarious. Like I had 30, 40 scripts I was putting through. And it was just coming through. I was channeling like crazy. And I had my evenings were like monopolized. And I had 16 to 20 different people every single night populating my meditations. And I realized going, okay, I got to do this full time. And it was just fascinating to watch how it was unfolding. I'm like, okay, there's something here.
So after he passes, a part of me died, right? So there was this whole identity that I had built with him, this belonging that I had found here. And all of a sudden that was gone. And what it created was this gap in my life and that I had to fill. But I didn't even know who I was anymore because I didn't have my entity anymore. So I realized that on top of my grief, I was gonna have to go through a really deep and long road of discovery again and really figure out, okay, so who is the Antonio at 40 years old without Lucas in his life? In a country that wasn't his originally, a country that he found belonging through something that may not feel as right anymore. So that was when the real deep work started. And again, the therapy was a component, the somatic work was a component. I really gave into other possibilities for healing. At the same time, I was invited to join this entrepreneurial organization. And there I also started learning who I was again as a person, as an entrepreneur. So it was like through these things that I started to realize who I was again. And at the same time, it became really clear that that teacher, that professor in me, that mentor had a purpose in my life. And through that journey, I realized that I want to help other people. And that's how the coaching business and my coaching practice started.
Well, I think and believe that this desire to belong is really fundamental to all of us. And what prevents us to access self-compassion is, for example, the critic that tells us, oh, compassion, that's this fluffy, dovey, pinkish kind of thing. That's not for you. You need to be hard in this world in order to get anything done. So we, beat ourselves up. And actually, the critic is one of the hindrances to self-compassion. And well, it's not wanting to get rid of the critic, which is, not possible, but it's such a wish because it hurts. The critic can hurt a lot. So it's about recognizing the voice of the critic, but not giving it that much space and beginning to cultivate a compassionate voice, which we also have, but it can be very little, like a little seed there that needs to be watered and nourished so it grows more and more. And it's about not giving in to the critic, or saying stop. And this is where fierce compassion comes in. There's a saying like, how I treat myself is how I treat others. So if I'm not that kind to myself, I'm also not that kind to others, and the consequences are isolation. It's actually eruptioning relational bonds, then cultivating them. And we become more and more isolated, which again is that signature of shame. So we're trapped in this, vicious cycle, and it's hard for us to build like genuine relationships that are not based on judgment and suspicion and paranoia.
just because I'm psychic doesn't mean that I have my guides like chattering to me every second of the day. But there's moments where I'll hear them, or a thought will get infused in my mind, or they'll do something to guide me in a direction, and I know they're guiding me to do it. I can tell the difference between my thoughts and a thought that's being given to me, and how they're steering me to go a certain way, or to talk to a certain person, or to speak a specific story. So I'm aware of their kind of like gentle, kind of subtle presence in the background. So they're there. There's a lot going on that we don't know, or consciously aware of. But when you become consciously aware of it, and you find kind of like evidential ways of kind of like proving that, or that those interactions are taking place, it's amazing, because then you're aware of a much greater whole world that is all around us, that is, more vast than just the physical experience itself. And I feel very blessed to have that wisdom and knowledge, but I like to share with people. It's not like I'm the only one that can go out there and talk to spirits or interact with spirits. I say go out there and explore, connect to the spirit world, invite them, talk to your guides, help, I request them to say, hey, I'm open to you kind of letting me know that you're more with me in some ways that I can tangibly like prove that you're there. It could be just sitting around the house and you have your digital recorder going and you just have a little chat by yourself. Next thing you know, when you listen back, you hear somebody chat back to you. I mean, that'll change your sense of reality real fast.
Yes, yes, a PhD in psychology and suffering from stage fright, not being able to sit even in a group of other psychologists where we're just giving information about our cases, sharing who we are and what we done on treatment, let's say. And by the time it got to halfway around the circle, my heart would, I'm talking about the racing heart. That's the one I knew most, is the racing heart that felt like a drum in my ears, just pounding, Fabio, pounding in my head. That's how frightened I was. Isn't that weird? I go through all those years of becoming a psychologist to understand human behavior, and here's this fright that I had to hide from others the best I could. First of all, I was asked to give a presentation on my research at the university, and I said, "No, no, not me. I have stage fright, or I can't. I have public speaking anxiety. No way can I do it." And the people who were interviewing me or who were talking to me, it wasn't an interview, said, "But isn't fear your business? Aren't you a psychologist? Isn't that what you do every day?" And there was, I think at that's a moment I look back on and see that there was already something uncomfortable about it, about me hiding, knowing, that personal development potential is really about accessing the more of who you can be. So, I mean, I already knew it, but it was something I didn't understand, couldn't control. So I think that's what started my journey to find my voice and to overcome stage fright. And I started with Toastmasters.
I was experiencing a lot of flashbacks, a lot of PTSD. I was numbing the pain with heavy use of marijuana. All of this happened in 2015. So in November 2015, I came home and I was just absolutely losing it. And I had some of this wood that I had picked up in June in the basement of the place where I was living at the time. And I'm one of those guys. I used to carry the pens around in my pocket, and I was breaking things. I tore off my shirt and I was smashing things and hitting things. And one of the things I did was I busted a pen on a chunk of wood that I had set up. I was going to turn it into a boat, right? So I had this pen on this chunk of wood, and it smashed, or it broke, or I broke it, and it leaked ink onto the wood. And then from there, I started adding, you know, I just kept going. I had some highlighters being a teacher, had some other things like that around, and I just started adding more color. And then within probably about maybe 3 hours, I had a little piece of artwork. I didn't think of it as artwork then. I thought it was just more like doodling. But that's what first started the artwork. And then I guess the healing, I guess, from there, because since then, over the years, now it's been 11 years since I started doing art. And I produced probably about 300 pieces of artwork. My artwork is very bright, vivid, colorful, and I think that's where those colors that I used to see as a kid, I can't see them now. I still can't, but they're expressed in the artwork that I've created over the last 10 years or so. So they have returned, but in a different form. Now everybody can see it, I guess.
The reason I do both is because my corporate work has been in public service, which is deeply meaningful, super values aligned. And I chose that career path because when I was sort of thinking about the world as a young person, I was like, where are the levers to address the largest amount of suffering? And for many people, it is the systems and structures that are run by governments. It is your access to transportation, it is your access to safe housing, it is your, in some cases, access to safe food and water. And in many, many places in the world, it is governments who make those decisions and set those policies and run those systems. And so I figured if I could get in on the end of the people building those systems, I have the chance to relieve suffering for potentially hundreds of thousands of people. That said, government takes a long time. And so, while it is very lovely and idealistic to feel like one day I will relieve suffering for hundreds of thousands of people, it's probably going to take my whole career to do some of those things because government moves slowly. And there's a reason for that. But I'm not a very patient person. And so 5 or 6 years ago, I got really frustrated because, I show up to my office, I send maybe 75 emails. I don't think I made a difference in anyone's life beyond cluttering someone's inbox. And that got to be a little bit sad as someone who, wants to have tangible impact in the world. And so I trained to become a therapist because when I see someone in my practice at the end of the session, I know I have made at least a small positive difference in their lives. And so for me, it helps balance the frustration of sort of a long career trying to do something that will impact many, many humans and the lack of fulfillment that I feel some days to then be like, oh, but I helped one person today. I relieved some measure of suffering for one human. And so this day was not a complete write-off.
Well, that's another funny story. I'm full of many funny stories. And I think it's just part of life. And if there's something that I have learned as a human being is that the more that you resist to life, you will feel more in trouble by life. So one of the things that I have noticed, and I always share with people, is I always follow my intuition. I am the person who I am. I have done what I have done because of that. Because even going back to that 10-year-old reaching for that book, because I'm really sure it wasn't like in the kids area. But just following my intuition is what has taken me into this journey and into the woman that I am. So with that said, I will say that my journey as a holistic health practitioner started by an accident and maybe not an accident.
There's a perception of Canada that, we are nice and we are nice, but there's also a perception that racism is, the United States. It's kind of the biggest secret everybody knows. And I know that that's almost doesn't make sense because secrets are secrets, but everybody knows that this thing happens here. But, we're very passive in terms of dealing with it. And the last thing I'll say sort of about this part is just that how I've phrased this in the past is that in the wintertime, if the streets are not plowed and salted and sidewalks are not plowed and salted in a timely manner to sort of meet citizen expectations, the city is up in arms. People are on Facebook, social media, saying, disparaging things about the city. They're calling, they're emailing, I need my sidewalks done. But if we know that 1/3 of the Black male population in Halifax has been charged with a crime, or if we know that there are Indigenous communities across the country who don't have clean drinking water, or if we know that Black people make up 3% of Nova Scotia's population, but nearly 14% of the incarcerated population, if we know these things, we don't have the same outreach. It's very selective, very, very, very selective in terms of what people will be upset about. And so we've got to move folks away from sort of over the hump of passivity. COVID, everybody knew about it, affected everybody. And racism, believe it or not, has an effect on everyone.
But one evening, I looked at Bill. He was helping me on something. And I looked at Bill and I thought, oh my goodness, he's a man. I know that sounds silly. But up until that moment, he was just my friend. And that evening, Bill called me the 3 nicknames my father had called me as a child. I don't know. Was that my father speaking? Was that a coincidence? Bill didn't believe in coincidences. If he was here, he would plot out the probability mathematically of that having happened just by, chaos. But to me, it felt important. And so the gift of my father dying early in my life taught me that you really have to love someone in the moment. You really do. Like, this is no kidding. And I've really tried hard to make a habit of telling people how I feel about them in the moment. That if something occurs to me, I have different levels of voices in my head. Some are just passing through. Some are like interesting. Some come, and if I hear them 3 times, I have a rule. 3rd time, I act on it. And some are like really loud, like somebody screaming at you and grabbing you by the shoulders. And I've learned one of the gifts of my father's passing when I was young was to pay attention to those impulses. And I think that was the gift that my father gave me. You never get another moment. Don't squander any moment you have.
Then I just been performing a very long time. And I think that maybe there's a bridge here for me to say that over the years that I was doing all of this performing, all was well. But as I got older, I started to have quite a bit of problems with my voice. So this is what led me down the holistic pathway of really having to figure out what was going on with me. And then everything from there that opened up, the doorways, the pathways for me were really a whole other world of learning my inner world versus my outer world. It was the polar opposite. I mean, when you're performing, you're like, well, wasn't she feeling and being emotional? Yes, I was, for sure. But I wasn't receiving it for myself in a way. I was feeling taxed and my voice was feeling taxed because what was happening was I was bumping up against a lot of energy in me that hadn't been processed, a lot of old compartmentalized energy. So my river, if you will, had stopped flowing the way that it needed to in order to really feed my voice, this life force. So that's what took me into all of my trainings and everything, was to try to really come back to the natural me, to my natural voice.
Part 2: The relationship between compassion and resilience. Renowned mindfulness teacher Jack Kornfield wrote, "If your compassion does not include yourself, it is incomplete." And the Dalai Lama famously said, "If you want others to be happy, practice compassion. If you want to be happy, practice compassion." Throughout Season 4, we explored the interplay between compassion and resilience. I was struck by how the voices of this season unpacked this topic and demystified the connection between these two ideas. Together, their insights revealed that compassion is a practice. It asks us to extend grace even to those we disagree with, and to stay loving in the face of suffering. Far from weakness, compassion is a strength-building force. It drives us to lean into our fears and to be kind to ourselves and others. It helps us to navigate life with less bias and greater understanding. Ultimately, compassion allows us to be more resilient, and resilience allows us to be more compassionate to ourselves and the world around us. It also increases our capacity to love and connect to our true essence. And as you will hear, in many ways, struggle and hardship are gateways to compassion.
Yeah, I was thinking about compassion a bit. I don't know, an example that I think could fit. I participated last weekend in a singing resistance. There's a group of singers and artists that have put together this, just like, again, fully community led effort to have people get together and sing in different spaces within the city. And so one of the early ones they did is like they walked to the different places, and this has started to be marked around our city, is like someone was abducted here. You know, there's like a sign, and it's a place where someone was abducted by ICE. And so they walked from place to place singing together and to neighbors to kind of hold on and get through this. But the one I participated in, we were downtown and we were singing outside of the hotels where ICE agents are staying, and with a plea or an invitation for folks to defect, to say, you know, you can join us anytime. You don't have to be on that side of things. You could be a hero by coming to, you know, leaving ICE, giving us a lot of information, ideally, about them. But yeah, really trying to like show up with like a radical kindness or like loving kindness, open heart toward ICE agents, which is not the posturing generally, but to sort of give them that chance. There's some like movement history and examples of times that that has worked. And so that is the action that they chose to do this last weekend. And I found it really powerful, just the like kind of singing and chanting together with, I think there are around 2,000 people, but also kind of practicing some degree of compassion toward the individuals who have signed up to be a part of ICE, to try to like humanize them to some degree, and to like at least maintain that compassion within ourselves so that we're not like completely hardened to this, I think, which is, I think, counter to having that long-term resilience.
I can definitely say that I'm resilient, but as I get older, resilience is not only tough, sharp edges and a good 1-2 punch. I think it used to kind of mean that, like, I can just roll with it, and I can take hits, and I can, you know, I can keep showing up and give it back if needed or whatever. Resilience to me is actually staying soft and loving and kind. For some reason, it's making me feel emotional, but it's being compassionate and kind and just soft, soft round corners, not sharp edges, in the face of uncertainty, in the face of sometimes strange cruelty, in the face of people's fears, in the face of whatever FGOs, is not allowing that to make you harden and reflect what might have come your way.
A lot of my compassion has come through my resilience. I can say that. I can say I've been a lot more compassionate ever since all the stuff that I've went through that I understand now. I'm a lot more compassionate to the person on the street because I don't know their story. And I know that all of us have a different story, and it's not always cut and dry. And these people, there's a lot of people out there that are hurting, and I think we all are hurting in some point. When I was in my using, I wasn't compassionate. I wasn't. I was an addict. I wasn't. You know, I'd lie. I'd steal, like stuff addicts do. Maybe not on like a large scale, but you would do those things. So I think through that, I understand. I understand now. Like, I understand why people do things, though, and like, yeah, and I think that's like you had to be compassionate about that, and yes, definitely be compassionate.
To me, compassion and empathy kind of go together. And when you are very empathetic and understanding about people around you, you are able to really kind of see how your goals can be met in that resilient mind frame, because you're not alone. You're not in a void, in a vacuum. It's not just you going to the other side to make sure something there's people there They're all there. They're all going to talk to you and maybe pay you or prevent you from getting something, or you might have to compete with them, or they might be your friend or your enemy, whoever. So having empathy and understanding, which is empathy plus understanding is compassion, to me it is. Having that kind of aspect in your general day-to-day life is so important to kind of moving you forward because you do catch more flies with honey than vinegar. Being kinder and nicer and just a joy to be around is really good. People tend to like those types of people. And if you are really resilient and moving towards a goal, that is incredibly important for you to have.
Compassion is resilience. Compassion for yourself, for the people around you, saying we're going to get through this and we're going to get through this together and we're going to care about each other as we get through it. That's what allows you to be resilient. That's what allows you to keep going day after day and setback after setback. Would resilience even exist without compassion? Without kindness? I'm not sure it would.
I think it's very important to be compassionate with yourself. Change is difficult, and punishing yourself doesn't help you. Being compassionate with yourself, allow yourself to feel what you feel without judgment, and focus what is in your control. That will build resilience. And working on being compassionate to yourself will help you be compassionate when people you care about are facing a difficult change.
I think a lot of compassion is required for resilience. And I talk about self-compassion because I think a lot of times it's a lot easier to be compassionate towards others than to yourself. So, at least for me, my ability to offer myself that compassion and to hold space for myself and say, it's okay. You're in the worst possible moment of your time right now, but there is only one way forward and it's up, right? Because when you're down here, the next move is up, as you go up and down in the life. When you die, it's a straight line, the ups and downs stop. So it's offering that compassion to yourself so that you can slowly begin to learn and put those blocks back together so that you can emerge at the top or on the other side, and then hopefully offer that compassion to other people who might need whatever you have to offer them.
Well, some self-compassion is a way to build resiliency, and because you're like, mindfulness, you notice how you're feeling, how you're doing, and then you can respond to it. And you can respond to it through kindness and friendliness towards yourself. That's the self-compassion element. And this is what is building the resiliency. You are training your prefrontal cortex, so when things come at you and hit that fan, you can notice that quickly, or rather than running in your limbic system, you come back online with your prefrontal cortex and, you catch yourself, you hold yourself, you are there for yourself through this difficult moment, through the difficult time, with kindness, obviously, rather than, self-criticism.
Well, compassion is an aspect of love because when you love somebody, you can compassionately do good things for them. You be compassionate for where they are in life. Compassion is very kind of intertwined with love in a sense. And I'd say that compassion for all things. I mean, that's something that the Dalai Lama would really kind of teach in from that kind of perspective, more so than me. But I would say that that's still an integral part of unconditional love. Is like it's still an aspect of the one. It's an aspect of the whole. It's not separate from. It's connected. And I think that if you can be compassionate in all aspects of life for humanity and all the world itself, then that's a good place to start. But that's kind of like that word is almost like there is no words. This is the thing. We've created words. You know what I mean? Is a language that we've created to understand a concept about how we approach things, right? So compassion and love are irreversible. They're reversible. They could be, you could go say one or the other, and it's the same. There's no separation. It's the same light. And I know people get caught up in language sometimes, but who are you to the core? How do you approach life from your core? Who is your true self? And be that with, your utmost ability within the world. And that's really what's going to shift and shape the world in a different way. And every spiritual teacher of the past has known this.
Well, I would bring it back to first myself and how I believe in the power of being a compassionate listener and a healer that then gives people the message that they can, which to me is resilience. They can come from someplace that they're stuck. And isn't that an amazing kind of thing? So I would say first, resilience and compassion have to do with me personally. But then the message I give to people is, all right, so you've got this thing called fear. Let's understand it. So, yeah, you were this little one and you were thrown into this spelling bee and your dad scolded you for losing. All right, let's look at the little girl who happened to be in the spelling bee and how she felt. Let's, she had all that pressure so that, we start to use compassion in the healing process itself. So that I would say that that's so important in coming to see fear as a protective device or something that we had to have in order to move on in life. To be more of who we needed to be, we needed to hide ourselves, and fear did a good job of doing that. Thank you, fear.
My understanding of compassion is that you are able to put yourself into a situation, not where you experience, maybe you have a vicarious experience and you feel for the person who is suffering, right? Who's experiencing those feelings. And we often associate that with negative feelings. I mean, you can be compassionate with joyous feelings too, I would imagine. But as it relates to resilience, if you can put yourself into a situation where you understand what that person is experiencing or going through, you're less likely to stand in their way, or you're more likely to offer assistance in helping them through their troubling time. But in regard to resilience, yes, if I see someone suffering, I kind of understand what they might be going through because I've also experienced that suffering. Again, even if it's not going out of my way to help that person, then at least, maybe if I was one of those kinds of people who would blame them and just say, oh, why don't they just get a job or whatever, I'll say, no, I can understand why, having been there, I can understand why they're maybe not able to work, right? Because they've got all this crazy stuff going on in their head. I've been there, I know that. And so you show a little bit of compassion that way. So instead of actively resisting or opposing, you're standing back and you're not doing anything at all, which is probably better than the actively opposing. Whereas others, in terms of compassion and resilience, they might go and be actively involved in helping that person with their troubles and their difficulties.
And I was lucky to train with the Compassion Institute, who helped reframe my thinking around empathy and compassion, because I find people interchange those words and pretend like they're the same thing, and they're really not. And so sort of what I took from their teachings was the empathetic practice is very much that like human level relating and understanding of suffering, but I don't have to own that suffering. It's not mine to own, unless I caused it, in which case that's a whole separate conversation. But that capacity to recognize, which is what comes in the narrative practice. Compassion is the informed action that comes from that empathy, in my understanding. And so I haven't always been good at sort of self-empathy, as it were, because for a long time, my body was just something that I used to get through the world. It was the thing that carried my brain around. And it didn't really matter what happened to it, so long as my brain was going where it needed to go. And so self-compassion has been a journey and continues to be a journey, but that sort of deliberate pause and noticing of values aligned action is something that I'm getting better at. I would say I do it far better for other humans. Maybe that's why, therapy is a reasonable place for me to be. But to also observe, as therapist, public servant, whatever hat I'm wearing, what is the action that I am being called to take? Both from the storyteller or the human sitting in front of me who I can empathize with, because suffering at its root is the same regardless of cause and regardless of experience. But then how are we shifting the world to alleviate that suffering or prevent future suffering? Is that practice of compassion. And if we are not resilient, if we are not well resourced, if we are not taking good care of ourselves, it is much harder to take that action.
I think it goes back into what I was talking about receiving. It comes to mind all the different stories that I heard from school social workers telling me of when I practice mindfulness, I feel more compassion for the person who's in front of me. I feel more compassion and I became less biased to the challenges that I see in her from parents or students. And at the same time, opening themselves and creating that compassion for the other person, you're also allowing yourself to receive that compassion. Because I had another social worker telling me, I noticed when it was just too much for me. And I had to step back and I had to say, I need to take a leave of 1 month. For me, that is resilience. That is understanding yourself, being mindful of others, but also mindful of yourself and what your needs are. And from that, you create resilience. You create that strength, that mental strength, that emotional strength. But if we don't bring compassion, we disconnect from that human part of just seeing you as a human person, which again, it takes us to when we think of the teacher, the counselor, even the school principal, even our educational leaders, we see them just as that role. But we have to remind ourselves at the end of everything, they're human beings. And that is why for me, compassion, it's so important. Compassion for me, it's telling that other person, I see you, I hear you, you're a human being. And again, for me, that is resilience. It's creating that strength, not only within myself, but with other people. Creating that connection, which I think that as human beings, we tend to forget. So I think it's time for human beings to see each other as human beings so we can start coming back together. And as we start coming back together within a group, within a community, as a society, we start coming back to ourselves.
This is interesting, very interesting, because, there's the notion of compassion fatigue. I think there is a relationship between the two. And I think that, do you need to be compassionate to be resilient in general? Do you need to be compassionate to be resilient towards community work per se? Do they need to exist together? My answer is maybe more questions, to be honest, rather than directly answering it, because I think that you need to have a level of compassion for yourself to be resilient. I think that's my answer.
If you're not connecting with another human being in those emotions, it actually hurts worse. Lonely, depressed, forlorn, isolated, all those things that we talk about in our society as being significant health risks and problems in our society. Those are worse than taking the risk to have that compassion, that joining of emotions with another. So we can build the habit of risking being with another because the alternative is actually worse. That's what I think about compassion.
Yes. So I'm just thinking about my singers on Friday and this compassion for the self. So right before they went on stage, each of them, we all gathered in my room, and I have these messages called the Good Parent Messages that are from the mother. And each of them chooses a good parent message. This is from the psychotherapy training, and it's to help anchor the heart and the compassion inside of the anxiety of what is about to happen. And it is a resilience that this person is feeling because they've been for months and months learning how to handle all of the energies of singing, vibration, and all of that. And then I'll say, pick a message. And some of them are, you are special to me. I love you. I give you permission to be all of you and not lose any of me. And like this is a big part of the work, because really at the end of the day, I will say that the compassion of the heart is the purpose of everything that I'm doing. And it is a big thing to open. It's not easy. It's not easy. There is a big path to compassion. And it is, I think, through resilience that compassion can have a chance. Because there's so much in the way for us all. So much in the way.
Special thanks to all of my incredible Season 4 guests: Julia from Minneapolis, Pia Mayo-Lichter, Sean Clear Sky Davies, Renee Sferrazza, Tara May, Alan Braude, Carla Affe, Antonio Leonard, Marcus Bowman, Sean Leonard, Doreen Downing, James Darren Corbiere, Naya Bajaj, Catalina Andrade, Dorico Simons, Rondalyn Whitney, and Anna Beaumont. To my listeners, thank you for your ongoing loyalty and support, and for tuning in to the Stumbling Spirit podcast. Thank you for listening to The Stumbling Spirit, Contemplations on the Path of Resilience. The Stumbling Spirit podcast is produced and hosted by me, Fabio da Silva Fernandez, and Resting Bell Wellness Inc. Royalty-free music is provided by Pixabay GmbH. If you wish, you can follow and DM me on Blue Sky at thestumblingspirit.bsky.social. Until next time, take a deep breath and another step forward on your path of resilience.